Russ, welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you with us today.
Pleasure to be here.
So many years ago, you did something that most people don't do. You joined the army. So before I start singing, you're in the army now. Tell me, what were you thinking?
I come from a background of very blue collar, very much not a lot of opportunity. My dad is a guy that didn't finish his sophomore year of high school. My mom was, kind of a homemaker, kind of all over the place. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity that I really saw growing up. And one of the things I knew I wanted to do was always pursue a higher education. And I knew that to do that, I would have to kind of figure some things out. So the military became one way to think of that. So that was, I would say, half of the motivation for joining the military. The other half was truly just to serve. It's something that I've always thought was important. I describe myself as violently American in the fact that I love my country. I love the people of my country. I may not necessarily love the government or whoever is running said country, but I really do believe that America is a special place. So I wanted to do something with that. And that led me to joining the military literally 2 weeks after I turned 17. Went to basic training between my junior and senior year, all that stuff. And then that was about technically all in about 14 years that I did. So.
What was your best, worst, and funniest moment from basic training?
Oh man, God, there's so many of them. Probably the best would be so I grew up in northern Colorado, but we weren't like a hunting family or anything. I had never even seen a firearm until I got to basic training. And then I ended up shooting expert and being a really good shot, and that led to a bunch of more opportunities. So that's probably one of the best ones was kind of that, finding a new skill and finding you're actually really good at it, which was really neat. The worst, oh man, there's so many that qualify. I went to basic training during the surge. So this is like 2009. So it was different. There were a lot of different and kind of crazy experiences. Probably the worst was when I first went. I was a fat kid. I was the big guy. And I was always worried about the physical fitness part, and surprisingly I had passed everything up to that point, and I had done pretty well, and I was really shocked by that, and I had gotten a lot better. And so the final physical fitness test comes around, and I missed it by one push-up. I don't know how. I spaghetti arms and just couldn't do it and just fell to my knees. And I was so embarrassed and so heartbroken that I thought I was gonna fail this and all these things. And thankfully it turned out that I was okay, and there was some makeup stuff that happened, but that was probably the worst. And funniest, man, there's a million of them. You've been there in the military, and that's I think universal for any
Yes.
military, is that the way you pass time is always interesting and things like that. So I mean, I've got a million funny ones. Probably one of the funniest ones would be we had a drill sergeant who was a little islander guy, and he would love to sneak up into the barracks on like a Sunday when you were supposed to be, you're not doing anything, but you're not supposed to be sleeping or acting a fool. And so he would come up, and he was little enough and he was unassuming enough that you would never notice him. So he would catch people doing the wrong thing all the time. And so he had some hilarious stories of just catching guys and then just, wrecking guys in the sand pit and things like that. So
I was really bad when it came to having my shoes polished and wearing the uniform properly and like doing all the things and being shaved. Like I wasn't properly shaved. And he would bring up a credit card or something like this on my
oh
and he would he had the eyesight of a hawk, our drill sergeant. He would scream from the other side of the base, and this must be, I don't know, 50, 100 feet away, "Soldier!" and you knew he was screaming at you, like you knew, and he had this Hawkeye thing going on,
Oh yeah.
and then he would make you walk all the way through the base, all the way to him, right? And now you're like, okay, I'm gonna get it.
Yep.
And then he pulls out his credit card, or he looks at your shoes, and then if it was the shoes, you know what the son of a bitch did? He pulled you up to one of the shoe shining spots. He shined your shoes himself.
Oh geez.
So he made you go through that humiliation of
Oof.
the sergeant shining your
It
shoes
was
because
geez.
you couldn't. Oh my God! It's just Lord. You don't want because he's giving you a lecture throughout the whole thing,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to get there. Um, so you got through boot camp. What happened next?
So I have a man. My story is very odd because so essentially, I joined in the middle. I joined through my junior year of high school. Came back my senior year of high school. Finished my senior year, and I had actually been accepted to here in the States. Um, we have a unique system. There's the military junior college system. So essentially, you can go to it's a junior college, and after 2 years, you commission as an officer, and then you go to a 4-year university and finish your degree, and then you go on to active duty. I had actually been accepted into one of these programs, and so my senior year of high school, I'm thinking I'm going to this military junior college, and I'm talking to my recruiter, and he's like, "Hey, so you're going to advanced training in a month?" And I'm like, "No, I'm going to Georgia. I'm going to school." And he's like, "Oh yeah, no, that paperwork never got done. Um, so that's not happening." So I quite literally drive down to the recruiting station and start raising holy hell. He had actually literally that day, that was his last day. He went to South Korea. He got assigned to South Korea. And so he had literally never done any of this paperwork. Um, so I didn't get to go to this military junior college. When I contacted them, they're like, well, and I had a full ride scholarship for this.
Oh my Lord!
So they go, well, we can't really do anything. You can apply for next year. So I got really disillusioned. And so I was technically in the reserves at this point. And so what I ended up doing is I said, screw it. I threw a Hail Mary for another job,
Hmm.
and I took that. So I stayed in the reserves for a few years. And yeah, my career is really weird because essentially I have time in all three components. I have time in the reserve component, the active component, and the guard component.
Hmm.
So most of my time was spent between the reserve, guard, and reserve component, and also on active duty with the National Guard. It's kind of weird, but so it's kind of an amalgamation of things. I was in for a really long time in very different capacities. So like my last duty station, my last active duty time before I completely got out of the military at all, was in the Texas Army National Guard on a program called Active Guard Reserve Duty, which is essentially you're a guard soldier,
Hmm.
but you are on active duty. So you're doing all of the things to keep the unit running. You're doing all the admin. You're doing all the really boring stuff that no one ever wants to do. But there's like 3 of you for like 160 people, so it's an incredible
Hmm.
amount of work, and it's a lot of admin, and it's a lot of trying to make things run smoothly. So yeah, my time in the military is very, very atypical from what a lot of guys have done. So it's very weird.
What kind of looking back on your service, what is the key, let's say, insights or changes to you that had happened there that you're kind of a different person coming out than coming in?
I will say that I definitely think that the military taught me not just resilience, but the it's kind of an alchemy, I guess, is the way I describe it. The military was there was so much of it where you look at it and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I really don't know if I'm good enough to do this. And to be really honest, for me, for for quite a while in the military, that was kind of an imposter syndrome that I lived with. And my big turning point was I had a platoon sergeant that there was this competition coming up for the best soldier in the division. And
Mm.
he was like, "Hey, you're going to do this." I was like, "I really don't want to." And he's like, "Well, that really sucks because you're gonna." Um, and so I was like, "All right." So did the first level, which was just, the battalion level. So out of about, 600 guys. And I did well and I won. Okay, great. So that gave me a little bit more confidence. And then I went to the brigade level. So now we're talking about like 3,000 people. And I smoked it and I won. And oh, okay. Suddenly I get a little bit more confidence. And essentially I took this all the way to past the division level. And it was a big deal. And it really taught me that I have that fear more than anything is usually the limiting factor for things.
Mm.
And that if you just try something, 9 times out of 10, the worst that happens is you fail. And the other times, if you do, you win, and you win
Right.
big. And so that was a big thing for me, was being able to just try, and realizing that it's not the end of the world. And even if you fail, who cares? At
Yeah.
least you tried, because that was one of my biggest things is, especially in combat arms, which was what I was in, failure is not tolerated much. Um, and there was a certain school I went to. I went to a mountain school, and I had actually been to a couple mountain schools, and I'm pretty darn good at it. And I went to this one, and I failed, of all things, the knot test, and it was
Mm.
one knot, and it was ticky tacky, to be honest, but
Mm.
by the standard, I did not meet the standard.
Mm.
And I failed that school, and that hit me really, really hard, especially in combat arms, because you don't fail schools. That's wrong. But the more I looked at it and the more I kind of, went with it, it was, okay, you failed it. That doesn't make you a failure.
Right.
That's kind of the dirty little secret, is that you're going to fail, right? It's what you do with it after. So being able to realize that, you have to try things, and even if you fail, it's okay, because the experience is what actually matters, was a big one for me.
Yeah. I empathize with that a lot. I think that's a lesson that's very valuable for a lot of people to learn, not just the youngsters. Um, and my officer used to say to me that there's only one way not to fail, for sure, and that's not to try.
Yep.
So that was his thing. So you're on your last day. You are about to start wearing civilian clothing for a long while. What's going through your head?
At this point, I was just happy to be I was happy to be done.
Mm.
And I still am happy that I'm not in currently. My
Mm.
biggest thing, and especially then as well, um, it wasn't missing the day to day. I don't miss getting up at 4:30 in the morning and doing 5 miles of PT and things like that. What I do miss is the boys. I miss my guys. I miss that camaraderie. Um, when I got out of the military, I moved to a completely different part of the country where I quite literally don't know anybody. And it's been a slog, you know, having a community. And what's amazing about the military is that it's built in. Um, you don't get me wrong. There are people in the military that I would love to forget. But there are a lot more people in the military that have left such a distinct impression on me as a person, that not having that is difficult. Not being able to look at somebody you work with, and they're not people you work with. They're your best friend. They're the person you actually trust your life to.
Yeah.
That takes a little bit of getting used to. But for me, getting out was a good thing. I had reached a point where I felt that my talents weren't going to be able to be as utilized as they could be in somewhere else, because the way the military works. It's structured, it's hierarchical for a reason.
That's
And you
right.
can't always have, freewheeling people with great ideas running around. It just doesn't work that way. And so I'm glad that I got what I did out of the military, but it made me realize that I need a little bit more of a freer hand to do things on my own. So,
There are some places in the military that allow for that type of personality, but they're few, far between them, and hard to get into them.
very.
I was lucky to be in a place as such, but it's not common. The What are we going to talk about today? Ancient Rome? Are we? Give me a point in time in history,
Okay.
and make me feel like I'm there.
Okay, so I will tell you. I'll tell you about what I actually what my specialty is. So I'm an expert in basically anything 1792 to about 1892, really into the 20th century as well. But one of I'll give you a really neat story about history. So in
Wait,
18,
hold on. Before you get into that, what the hell? How did you fall in love with history? Like, what?
yeah,
From a army guy to a history buff. Where maybe that started before, I don't know. But what's the backstory?
it started when I was a kid. I've always been obsessed with history. At first, most boys are obsessed with military things, military
Yeah.
history, so they start reading more about that and things. But I've always loved history. What I've really found with history is that it's just stories.
Hmm.
People get really, really caught up on dates and
Yeah.
figures and things
Yeah.
that don't
It's
matter so
stupid. It doesn't
much.
matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter so much. What I tell people about history is that, um, they have this misconception or this kind of crazy notion that people 2,000 years ago were different than people 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But people are the same. They get happy, they get hungry, they get horny.
Yes.
Across time.
Yes.
And so I've always loved stories and I've always loved history. But basically, my story starts when I was about 8 years old. I was in northern Colorado, which is where I'm from, with my mom, walking through our local town, and there's a storefront, and it's full of coins. And so one thing leads to another. We go inside, and the guy that owns it was named Leon, and I worked for him on and off until I was 16.
Oh.
And so I became an expert in that. And it's just something that I was able to, thank God, I was able to monetize after the Army in my new position. And it's just something that I love deeply and is a big core part of me.
So make me fall in love with the 1805.
I'm gonna make you. I'm
Why
gonna
should I
make.
be in love with 1805?
I'm gonna give you 1861, and I'm gonna give
Fair
you a
enough.
really neat story. So, um, again, the Civil War starts in January or so of 1861, and at this time, the U.S. is making coinage in a couple different facilities. One of them is in the mint at New Orleans. So, in January of 1861, when Louisiana secedes from the Union, the militia troops, the Louisiana militia, seizes the Louisiana Mint. As they seize this mint, under the auspices of the sovereign state of Louisiana, they decide that they're going to keep making coins. So what they do is they arrest everybody that works for the mint. They essentially say, you can sign this loyalty oath to Louisiana or you can go away. So most of them do. And they start making coins, but they're not doing anything special. They're making the exact same coins with the exact same design, with the exact same metals that they have. So they're doing this for about 2 months. And then they end up joining the Confederacy. So the same thing happens. The Confederacy comes in, and the Confederacy starts making coins. But again, they're the exact same design, all these things. And they're mainly making 50-cent pieces and $20 pieces. And what's really neat is through a bunch of nerddom, which is really just looking very closely. It's called a die study. We can actually tell who made these coins, under which auspices.
Mhm.
So you can literally get a coin that was made by the Confederate States of America. which is very neat. But the cool part of this story actually kind of butts into a story that takes place in my shop. So with all that background in mind, and knowing that I really like those particular coins, about 2 years ago, we had a lady come in and she has a suitcase, 1950s vintage suitcase. She hands it to me. She hands her number to my counter manager and she goes, "Let me know when you're done." She walks out. Okay. So we open the suitcase and we start going through it, and we about fell over. It was probably the freshest and most original collection anybody's seen in about 30 years. It was all bought from dealers in the 1940s, which is unheard of. And it all had essentially tags with it, which is also unheard of. So we start going through this collection and we start finding just incredible stuff. By the time it's all said and done, this collection is worth well over $500,000.
Oh, wow.
So we call this woman as we're going through it. We go, "Do you have any idea what's here?" And she goes, "I don't know, a couple $1,000s. Why?" And we go, no, you don't understand. So we explain it to her, and she breaks down crying because it turns out the only reason she's selling this collection is because she's about to lose her house. So not only were we able to save her house, she was able to buy her house outright with what we paid for this. But she tells us more of the story, and it turns out that this collection was actually put together by her great-grandfather, who was born in the 1860s. He was a collector until about the 1940s. When he passed, her mother had it in her under her bed for like 30 or 40 years, and it was under this woman. It was in this one's closet for another 30 years, and she literally never sold it while she was going through all these hard times because she had no idea what it was worth. She had zero idea until she brought it to us. But so while I'm going through this collection, in they're small manila envelopes, I pull out one of these envelopes, and on it is written $50, 1861, New Orleans Mint. How much he paid for it, which was $1, in February of 1916. And so I pull this coin out, and it is what it is. And it is a specimen that, unless you're a big nerd like me, it doesn't mean a lot. But it is unbelievably rare. It is a Louisiana issue, so the state of Louisiana was actually the second, probably about the second week they started making them. It's one of those. So it's made by the state of Louisiana. But what's amazing to me and why I love the coin so much is, one, it's made by the state of Louisiana, so that's got a cool factor for it. Number two, it comes from this collection, which has another super cool factor from it. And number three, I'm the second owner of it. The guy bought it in 1916 and he died in the 1940s, and that collection has been hidden for well over 90 years at this point. And so it turns out that I'm now the second guy that owns it. And to me, I'm a steward of history. I'm a steward of these things. They're gonna live long after I do. And now I'm a part of that story. I hope that someday, it'll be in an auction and it'll be, part of the Russ Bega collection or something like that. But what's amazing is that through literally, hundreds of years of history, I've now added to it. Not only have I added to it, I'm part of that story. And that's what makes this stuff so cool, because they're just a bunch of stories, and you get to make your own part of that story, which is what I love about this.
It's amazing. Did she keep something of that collection as memorabilia?
I think she kept a piece or two. But what we actually find a lot is most people, especially with a collection like that, they don't generally care too much. Some people do, but most people would rather take the money and run, which I understand. But I'm also a big sentimental softie. If I work on a collection, I generally buy at least one piece from it. I really like honoring the memory of the people that did this. And that's, I think, a little bit because I'm going to be that person, in 50 or 60 years, my collection will go through the same thing. But I really like owning just a small piece, just to just to honor that person and their time and their commitment to it. Because I think hobbies kind of get a bad rep sometimes of like being a noble or kind of things like this, a waste of time.
Right.
But I think anything that anybody takes time to do and do well and really care
Right.
about, I think should be honored,
Right.
at least to some degree. So
What's the is there anything that goes into it from a perspective of you've bought this piece or part of a collection? Are you documenting these stories? Are you
yeah.
capturing them in a way that kind of they continue to live? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I actually really try to do that a lot. I'm a pretty prolific writer, and also
Mm,
presenter. So I speak at a lot of so the world of coins is kind of mystifying to a lot of people, but we're like any other hobby. We
mm,
have big conventions, right? So we have big conventions every year. We have them multiple times a year. I'm actually delivering a lecture at one of them in August, and I usually deliver lectures probably 3 to 5 times a year with this stuff. And what I do is I'm a little bit less academic with it, and I'm more
mm,
of the storyteller. So
mm.
like that story I told, uh, that's been written about. I have others that I've written about, and I really like writing articles. I like writing things that put people in that frame of mind.
Right.
So one. Like a really neat story that's kind of quick is essentially we had a woman come in with a $10 gold piece from 1797. Gorgeous coin, very very well preserved. We bought it from her. We sold it, blah blah blah. And the entire time I'm asking her, I was like, I want to know more. Where did this come from? Where did this come from? And she goes, oh well, maybe I'll tell you the story one day. And so finally, I pry her enough for her to tell me the story. And the story is amazing. The gist of the story is the coin has been in her family since about 1805, 1806, and it was owned by her ancestor, a guy named Captain John, and he was a New Jersey socialite essentially, and he kept running away to sea. And his father finally got sick of it and said, if you're gonna do this, if you really want to go to sea, you're gonna be a sea captain. So he apprenticed him to a Swedish captain, and before he left on his European adventure, he gave him three $10 gold pieces and he said, buy something for your sisters. He has three sisters. Okay. Well, he comes back a couple years later. He still has the $10 gold pieces. He made enough money, blah, blah, blah. And this coin was passed down with his sword for literally the next 200 years.
Wow.
And the woman is in my shop selling it to me. And so finally I get the story of why she's selling it to me. She sold it to fund her daughter's PhD.
Oh, wow.
But
So
what
it was his daughter, but his great, 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 great,
yes,
great, great, great
but
granddaughter.
what's amazing is this family has a history of doing this, of
Oh,
running
wow.
away. And her so
I love that.
Captain John's grandson kept running away and eventually became a confidant of Walt Whitman.
Oh, wow.
So not only is this family a bunch of sailors and poets, but they know it. And she is actually a poet as well. So she wrote me a little blurb, and it was probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever read, to be really honest. And the gist of it was essentially, sometimes all a parent can do is
Mm,
give their children a little bit of gold, or the little bit of gold that they have, and hope that they've armed them with enough knowledge and enough compassion to go out and make it in the world.
right.
And so I thought that story how perfectly does it over time, just fit together. So I wrote about that, and I wrote her story, and that to me is so powerful. And so yeah, that's what it is. It's all stories. That's it.
You're not gonna get a fight from me. We're literally called Story Samurai. I'll tell you more than that. I think that even most people don't know it, but every single person has a story to tell.
Hmm?
Everybody has at least one story, and by God, it's many more than one. Um, so that's part of our mission here. we have only one. First of all, this has been fucking delightful, Russ. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
We have one fixed question that we ask every single guest. It's, if you had to go back to the hardest point in your life, what advice would you give yourself?
Man, I think that's a hard one. There's a lot of points in my life that I kind of used to look at the hardest. I'm a single dad. I'm a guy that got divorced a few years ago. Um, my life has been a lot of struggle throughout it. I grew up in a tough home. I lost my mom really early when I was about 17. I haven't spoken to my dad in a really, really long time. A lot of turmoil and things. But I think the advice that I wish I could give my younger self, kind of in any of that, is, God, it's got to be somewhere along the lines of take a breath. There were so many times where um, I would panic so much in anything. It's that fear, it's that weight pushing down on you, and so you're making decisions that may not even be decisions that make sense or that aren't even right, or you're just catastrophizing things. So my biggest advice to myself has, and I think will always continue to be, take a breath. Most things are not the end of the world. I had a master sergeant who was my boss for a while, who gave me some advice that really resonated with me. At one point he said, and this is, we're in a garrison environment, we're doing paperwork essentially. He says, nothing we're doing right now is life or death.
Mm.
And realizing like, hey, like, it's not the end of the world, is a big thing. And so I have gotten a lot better over the last few years of being able to say, let's take a break. Let's take a breath. Let's reevaluate. Let's not do a bunch of dumb shit that is going to make us go uphill, because that's always the worst, right? When you make more work for yourself out of panic. And so Zen. I think Zen.
God, if I had to answer that question, I feel deeply empathetic with your story, and I would say almost the same thing. Slow down, Ari.
Yeah.
You're about to do something stupid.
Yep.
Russ, what an absolute delight. Um, where's your store? How can people find you?
Yeah, so we're at 31 North Clark Street in Chicago, Illinois. Our company is Harlan J. Burke Limited. You can find us at hjbltd.com. We do, my firm specializes, we're the largest ancient coin dealer in North America. We're one of the larger antiquity houses. We also do U.S. coins, bullion, things like that. What I tell people about where I work is that it's a giant museum where you get to play with everything. When I tell you that this is an open invitation to come in and quite literally play with ancient history, that's what it is. We love it. So,
Russ, thank you so much for joining the
of
show
course,
today. I
all right. Thank you,
appreciate
brother.
you.